Marcus Caldwell was 41 years old and had spent the better part of a decade being the most underestimated man in any room his wife brought him into. He wore a 7-year-old Blazer to dinner parties. He drove a Nissan Sentra with a slow leak in the rear left tire he kept meaning to fix. Denise's friends called him steady, which was the polite word, and boring, which was the word they used when they thought he couldn't hear, and she had stopped correcting either one somewhere around year 4 of the marriage. What none of them knew, not Denise, not her colleague Preston Hartwell, who had taken to sitting too close to her at dinner and laughing too loudly at things that were not funny, was that at 2:47 that same afternoon, in a conference room on the 14th floor of a building 7 blocks from the restaurant, Marcus had signed a logistics infrastructure contract worth $710 million over 6 years with a regional hospital consortium that had been courting his firm for 11 months. He had driven directly from that meeting to the restaurant where his wife was already seated, blazer unchanged, slow tire unchanged, and he had said nothing about it to anyone. What happened that evening would cost Denise something she could not have named if asked, because she had never once thought to look for it. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning of that Tuesday had started the way most of Marcus's mornings started, quietly before the house had any reason to be awake, and the kitchen with the lights low and the coffee going and the particular stillness that belongs to people who have learned to value the hour before the world asks anything of them. He stood at the counter and looked out at the backyard, at the deck he had built over 2 weekends 3 summers ago. The one Denise had called fine when he finished it. Not enthusiastically, just fine, the way you might describe a repair that met the minimum standard. He had been proud of it anyway. The joists were properly spaced. The ledger board was lag-bolted correctly into the rim joist of the house. It would outlast both of them, that deck, and he found a quiet satisfaction in that which had nothing to do with whether anyone noticed. His grandmother, Iris Caldwell, who had raised him in a narrow row house in Richmond after his parents separated, used to say, "Build the thing right, Marcus. Build it right even when nobody's watching, because the thing itself knows." She had been talking about character mostly, but she had also been talking about construction, because she was a practical woman who believed the physical and the moral operated by the same principles. He had built a lot of things since then. He had met Denise at a fundraising gala in Charlotte 8 years ago. She was a pharmaceutical marketing director, composed, expensively dressed, the kind of woman who held a room's attention without appearing to try. He had been there representing his logistics firm, which at the time was 4 years old and profitable, but not yet remarkable, and he had been wearing a rented tuxedo and had felt mildly fraudulent in it. She had laughed at something he said about the appetizers, genuinely laughed, the real kind, and he had decided that evening that she was worth knowing. They had married 2 years later. The early years were good, or good enough, which Marcus understood was a different thing but had taken time to fully reckon with. Denise was driven and social, and had a gift for the architecture of her room. Who should be seated where, who should meet whom, how an evening should be shaped. He had admired this about her. He had also gradually come to understand that this gift came with a corresponding habit of assessment, of organizing people by their apparent value, placing them accordingly, and updating the arrangement when the estimates changed. The estimates for Marcus had apparently not changed in some time. It had started small, the way these things do. A comment at a party, "Marcus doesn't really follow this stuff," when the conversation turned to finance. A redirect when he began to answer a question someone had asked him directly. What he means is, as if his sentences needed professional translation. Small subtractions. He had noticed each one and filed them the way he filed structural anomalies. Not alarming individually, but worth tracking, because patterns have a way of telling you where the failure will eventually occur. Preston Hartwell had appeared 14 months ago. He was a regional director at Denise's pharmaceutical company, tall, loud, in the particular way of men who have decided that volume is a personality, and possessed of the specific confidence that comes from never having been seriously wrong about anything that mattered to him. He drove a new Range Rover. He knew the right restaurants. He had taken to joining their social group with a frequency that Marcus had observed without commenting on. And at these gatherings he had developed a habit of addressing Marcus with the slightly exaggerated courtesy that men use when they have decided someone is not a threat. Marcus noted this. He noted the way Denise's posture changed when Preston was in the room. He noted the new perfume she had not mentioned buying, the phone she now placed screen down on the table. The evening phone calls she took in the bedroom, with the door closed, which was new. He was a logistics engineer. He built systems. He understood that the plural of small signal was pattern, and pattern was information. And information required a response, not an immediate one, but a measured one calibrated to what was actually true, rather than what was feared. 3 months ago, he had called Raymond Okafor, his father's oldest friend and a retired attorney in Durham, and told him what he had observed. Raymond had listened without interrupting, which was his practice, and then said, "You have a partner named Darius on the firm, correct?" "He handles the legal side of the business contracts," Marcus said. "Then you have everything you need," Raymond said. "Move deliberately, don't react, and for the love of God, don't tip your hand." He had, instead, spent the past 3 months doing what he did best, gathering, documenting. He pulled together 5 years of personal financial records, cross-referencing the joint account against Denise's separate spending in the months since Preston had entered their orbit. He met twice with Patricia Hines, a family law attorney in Charlotte that Raymond had recommended, who was efficient and direct, and who reviewed his records with the brisk precision of someone for whom the emotional content of these situations had long since ceased to be surprising. He signed a document storage agreement and transferred copies of everything that mattered to a secure offsite account. And through all of it, through the 3 months of quiet preparation, the Saturday meetings in Durham, the careful continued performance of ordinary life, the consortium negotiation had been running its own parallel track. 11 months of proposals and revised terms and in-person presentations, and the particular patience required to let an institution of that size reach its own conclusion on its own schedule. His firm had built the operational framework for 2 of the consortium's smaller facilities 5 years prior. The work had been good work. The work had been noticed. The contract had come because of what had been built right when nobody was watching. At 2:47 on that Tuesday afternoon, in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of uptown Charlotte that Marcus had never found it useful to mention to anyone, he had signed his name to a document that his firm's accountant had described, with professional understatement, as transformative. He had driven from the parking garage directly to the restaurant where Denise had made the reservation for 6:30. He had not changed his blazer. He had not called ahead. The rear left tire still had its slow leak. He was early, and he sat at the table and ordered water and looked at the menu, and felt, in the most private part of himself, a profound and settled calm. The kind that comes not from having won something, but from having finished something, from having built the thing correctly and known it before anyone else confirmed it. Denise arrived with Preston and 2 other couples he recognized from their social circuit, the kind of dinner that had been described to Marcus as casual, just friends, which meant he had not been consulted on the guest list. She kissed his cheek at the table, a brief performative press that communicated obligation rather than warmth, and sat down. And the table arranged itself in the way it always arranged itself at these things, with Preston at the conversational center and Marcus in a comfortable periphery. It was 40 minutes in when it happened. The table had been talking about a real estate development project that Preston had some involvement with, a mixed-use complex on the east side, and the conversation had moved to commercial infrastructure and financing, and Marcus had said something, a specific observation about logistics corridor positioning that was, in the dry way of his professional vocabulary, accurate and relevant. Preston had smiled the smile. "That's an interesting take," he said, in the tone adults use with children who have said something unexpectedly coherent. "For a guy who, what is it you do again, Marcus?" "Distribution, right?" A few people at the table looked at their plates. Denise did not look at her plate. She said with a small laugh that she had clearly decided in advance was harmless, "He manages a small freight operation. It keeps him busy." She said it the way you might describe a hobby. She said it to Preston, not to Marcus, which was the detail he noted and stored. Marcus picked up his water glass. He took a sip. He set it down. He said, "Logistics infrastructure, actually." "Right, right," Preston said, already moving on. Marcus let it move on. He asked the table a question about something else, and the conversation flowed the way it always flowed at these things. And he ate his dinner and listened and said what was appropriate and nothing more. He watched Denise across the table, watched the easy, practiced way she managed the room, and he felt not anger, but the particular clarity that comes when you have been shown a thing you needed to see. He paid the bill before it reached the table. the way he always did, and nobody remarked on it the way they never did. In the car going home, Denise was talking about Preston's development project, about the financing structure, about who was involved. She was animated in the way she got when she had enjoyed an evening. Marcus drove and listened. "You were quiet tonight," she said, when the conversation paused. "I was having a good day," he said. "I didn't want to interrupt it." There was something in his tone that she heard but couldn't place, the way you hear a sound in a house and can't identify its source. She let it go. At home, she went upstairs. He sat on the deck for a while in the dark, on the chairs he had made from the same white oak as the joists, and he listened to the neighborhood settle around him. And he thought about his grandmother's sentence, the one about building the thing right when nobody was watching. And he understood that he had been living inside that sentence for a long time and was only now approaching what it had been building toward. He called Raymond from the deck. "It's done," he said. "The contract?" Raymond said. "The contract," Marcus said. "And the rest of it. Patricia has everything she needs. I'd like to move on Friday." Raymond said, "I'll be there." Patricia arrived at the house on Friday morning with the separation agreement and a summary of the financial documentation Marcus had compiled. Raymond came down from Durham. Denise came downstairs at 8:30 to find them at the kitchen table, and her face performed in sequence confusion, then wariness, then the particular stillness of someone who understands the room has already been arranged without them. Marcus poured her coffee and set it in front of her. He sat down. "I want to show you something," he said. He opened the folder on the table. The first page was the executed contract, not the full document which ran to hundreds of pages in Darius's office, but the signature page which had the number on it and the date and his name. He watched her read it. She read it twice. "Tuesday," he said, 2:47 in the afternoon. "I drove directly to the restaurant. The silence in the kitchen was a specific kind, the kind that follows the collapse of a load-bearing assumption." "Marcus," she said. "The separation agreement is next in the folder," Patricia said, in the steady practiced tone of someone who had sat in many kitchens at many tables. "The house, the joint accounts, the firm, Darius has the full business valuation. You'll want your own counsel before you sign anything." Denise looked at Marcus, not at the folder, not at Patricia, at him. And in her face was something he had not seen in a long time, something that might have been the beginning of actual attention, actual looking. The kind that comes too late because it only arrives when the cost of having not looked becomes clear. "You never said anything," she said. "No," he said. "All this time, you never." "I built things right," he said. "That's what I do." He closed the folder and slid it toward Patricia. He stood, carried his coffee mug to the sink, rinsed it, set it in the rack. He put on his jacket, the 7-year-old blazer, the one that had been in that conference room on Tuesday, the one that would go to the back of the closet now because it had done what it needed to do. "Tell your attorney to call Patricia," he said. "She'll take care of the rest." He said goodbye to Raymond at the door, a handshake that held a moment longer than a handshake needs to. The way they did it, the way men do when words are insufficient, and presence has to carry the weight. Then he walked to the Sentra with the slow leak in the rear left tire, which he had already scheduled to be fixed that afternoon, because there was no reason to carry a problem you could simply solve. And he drove toward Raleigh and the work that was waiting for him there. "The thing itself knows," his grandmother used to say. He had always believed her. Marcus moved into a house in Raleigh that he had designed the renovation of himself and finished over the course of a long winter with a crew he trusted and a set of plans he had drawn by hand. The deck was white oak, properly jointed, properly bolted. The coffee was still made in the French press Iris had given him, which had survived every transition intact. The separation had been clean in the way that things are clean when one party has prepared and the other has not. Denise retained her income and her car and a settlement figure that Patricia had negotiated with a measured fairness of someone who believed in correct outcomes rather than punitive ones. The house in Charlotte sold in 3 weeks. Preston Hartwell, Marcus learned through Raymond's reliable peripheral vision, had quietly distanced himself from Denise in the weeks following the Friday morning kitchen meeting, which surprised no one who understood the mathematics of that particular kind of interest. Denise had called once, in February. He had let it go to voicemail and listened to it once, and then deleted it. Not with anger, but with the finality of a man who has assessed a structure and determined it cannot be made sound, and has moved on to the next project. He had dinner in April with a woman named Simone, a civil engineer he had met during the consortium project's early site work, who had the quality of being exactly who she appeared to be. No more, no less, consistently, which Marcus had come to understand was rarer than it should be and worth more than most things he had once thought to value. They had eaten at a quiet place and talked about bridge load tolerances and her nephew's Little League season and the particular satisfaction of work that lasts, and he had driven home afterward in the new truck he had finally bought himself. Sensible, reliable, his, and felt something he recognized after a moment as uncomplicated happiness. He sat on the Raleigh deck on a Saturday morning in May with his coffee and watched the light move across the yard and thought about what his grandmother had told him and thought about the conference room on the 14th floor and the blazer on the chair and Denise's face reading the number on the signature page and the slow tire that was no longer slow. You built the thing right, even when nobody was watching, especially then, because eventually the thing spoke for itself. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.